Hidden Bristol, sponsored by First Great Western, building a greater West.
OK, so you think you know all there is to know about Bristol, eh? Well, think again. My name is Richard Wyatt and this is Hidden Bristol, the programme that sets out to lift the lid on all things inventive, unusual and exciting about this city.
In this episode, we visit the Bristol base of the world's fastest car, where I get a chance to put my supersonic driving skills to the test.
800 miles an hour, 900 miles an hour.
I'll be taking a look at art on our streets, talking to the man who turned Park Street into a water slide.
But first, Bristol has recently celebrated the 150th anniversary of the grand opening of the Clifton Suspension Bridge, designed, of course, by Isambard Kingdom Brunel. And now comes news of a new museum for the city, one that's going to be dedicated to the life and work of this most illustrious Victorian engineer.
Being Brunel is planned for construction alongside the SS Great Britain, where the new museum will include the original building from which Brunel designed his great ship.
These are the offices that he would have used. It's an empty shell now, but the idea behind the Being Brunel project is to recreate in this building something of the atmosphere of 1840, a very important year. It was the year Brunel arrived and told the directors of the Great Western Steamship Company that he'd changed his mind about a certain design detail. And talking of design, this is the room where they're going to recreate Brunel's drawing office. You can just imagine the great man would have been poring over the details of his new ship in front of this oriel window, flooding the office with light. It's also the point in which he decided he wasn't going to use paddles to power his ship anymore, but try something very new and relatively untested, a screw propeller. Well, once the board had come on board, an expensive change, the ship was launched in 1843 and became the first ocean-going, iron-hulled, screw-propelled, steam-driven liner in the world. Rian, you've got the ship. She's a museum in her own right. Why do you need another one?
Because what we need to do is really understand what made Brunel, what shaped him, his upbringing, his environment. There's so much to find out about him that we can't tell people just with the ship herself.
So it's much more about the man and his time. Now, you're a bit short of space here. Where's the new museum going?
Well, the buildings that you can see behind us are all dating from the 20th century, so they're not contemporary with the ship herself. So those will be coming down. Brunel's original drawing office, of course, will be staying. That's where Brunel did some of the planning for the ship herself. So the new museum will be connected by a bridge to the drawing office, recreated as it would have been in the early 1840s.
I'm sure there are a lot of people who think that all the sort of Brunelabilia has been exhausted. Are there actually things people haven't seen that they will be able to see now?
Absolutely, there are lots of new things that people haven't seen before. People may not know that on the other side of the ship we have the Brunel Institute, where all of our collections are kept in store, and we have a huge number of objects that people haven't seen before.
Well, you join me in the archive vault now with curator Eleni. It's quite a noisy place.
That's right. Well, this is a dehumidification system. It's our way of controlling the environment for the benefit of the collection that we keep in here.
Absolutely. Well, when you think vaults, you think money, and what you've got here, I'm sure, is priceless. Now, look, we've just selected a few things. As far as the new museum is concerned, what's the significance of the sketchbook?
Well, this is one of those incredible entries that capture so much of what made Brunel. The idea is, what would it have been like to have been in Brunel's brain?
You've got a fully fledged Great Eastern on one page and a lovely little portrait of a man looking through some sort of viewing, some sort of sight.
A lookout pipe, yes, it's a very charming entry.
Now, let's get on to personal objects. a penknife. Indeed, it's got IKB on it.
That's right. So this is a penknife that IKB would have used. It's one of the very intimate personal objects that we have in the collection. And we think that this is one that he would have held when he was inspecting the Great Western Railway.
Brunel as an image, probably the most famous image of all is the photograph of him in front of the chains of the Great Eastern. We've got Brunel the celebrity here as well, haven't we?
Indeed, very much aware of his own image, and this specific image was one that was produced after his death. People had that interest in acquiring images like this and celebrating his name after 1859.
It's, as you say, a very famous image of him, and famous also because you see Brunel with a cigar. And my favourite amongst the artefacts I've seen so far is his cigar case.
Indeed. Well, we know that he had a furious addiction for smoking, and we know that this one would have room for 48 cigars and would have been kept at the Athenaeum Club in London. So it's really fascinating to be able to share it with the public for the first time.
It's fascinating stuff.
Thank you.
Well, the bridge of the Great Britain is giving us a great view of the dockside complex that's going to be redeveloped for the new Being Brunel Museum. That's where many of those artefacts we've been showing you will go on display to the public for the very first time. The Great Britain is very much about Brunel the engineer. The new museum is going to be all about Brunel the man. And that's not the only bit of Brunel engineering getting updated around these parts. This year, billions are going to be spent on electrifying the London line. It's going to be the biggest investment in this rail route since Brunel built the Great Western. Trains are going to be quieter, smoother and faster. It's certainly going to benefit passengers like these. But here on platform 3, there's one little traveller not leaving anytime soon. But when you get a little closer, you'll see all is not as it seems. This is Maya, just one of many pieces of public art that adds some colour to the streets of Bristol. She's the work of locally based Luke Jerram, an artist who certainly brought public art to everyone's attention last year when he turned Park Street into a water slide for the day. I've come to meet Luke here at his studio at Spike Island on the Cumberland Basin to talk about what public art means to him. A lot of people in Bristol will remember you most of all for the water slide in Park Street. Is it art?
I'm not sure whether it's art, to be honest. I'm still in two minds. I don't necessarily think it matters. You know, sometimes I think you can just do this stuff. It's a nice idea. We had 60,000 people turn up on the day to watch. What I really liked was the fact that everyone was there from all different levels of society, and it was fantastic.
What's in the pipeline for you next?
Well, the next big project I'm working on is called Withdrawn, and it involves installing a flotilla of 5 fishing boats in the middle of Lee Woods in Bristol. The boats are going to be installed in April for the European Green Capital, and they'll be there for 7 months as a venue really for arts organisations around the city to use. So we're having choirs turning up and theatre productions on the boats, lectures and turning the space into a cinema.
Where did that idea come from? Boats in a wood?
The imagery of that came from all the sort of extreme weather that certainly last winter, when we saw, you know, the Somerset levels completely flooded, and you'd see cars floating down roads and houses underwater.
We're not talking in a way about permanent public art, because in many of the things you do, it comes, it flourishes, it's enjoyed, and then it goes away again. I mean, is that something that you are aware of and something that you like?
The nice thing about doing temporary public art is that you can kind of get away with murder, really. You know, there's no way in hell you'd get the chance to actually put a permanent slide on Park Street. Public art is really difficult to make. You know, what I've realised over the years is it's much easier to put something in a gallery where it's not going to get vandalised and trashed. Outside, You have to make artwork that's weatherproof, vandal-proof, that isn't a hazard to anyone touching it, you know, and it's actually really difficult, which is why a lot of public artwork is these big lumps of steel or these big lumps of concrete, you know, because that's the sort of thing that's going to last for 20 years. It's a really difficult thing to do.
Looking around Bristol and at other people's art, is there anything you like?
I suppose I quite like those sort of incidental events around a city. In the middle of Lee Woods, there's a wishing tree. And this is an old log, gnarly old log, and people have stuck pennies in it. So it's almost like folk art, and I'm interested more in those, perhaps, than the sculptures of dead people that you see around a city.
Well, if sculptures of dead people don't do it for you either, there are more unusual permanent pieces to explore in Bristol. I've come to Royal Fort House near Park Street, where public art producers Situations helped bring to life this reflective work by artist Jeppe Hein.
Well, Georgina, this is certainly nothing like the architecture of the Royal Fort. We've got this amazing maze of stainless steel mirrors. What can you tell us about the inspiration behind this piece?
Jeppe Hein was very inspired by the landscape gardener who designed this Royal Fort Gardens in the 18th century, I think it was, Sir Humphrey Repton, who had the same ideas of wanting to evoke imagination and play through the gardens. And Jeppe was very interested in trying to evoke that same feeling through people's exploration of the sculpture and its reflection of the gardens and the house.
You can certainly interact with this. You can wander through the maze, you can look at your own reflection. It reminds me of the sort of end of the pier hall of crazy mirrors. Well, we're talking about public art, but of course this is on the campus of the University of Bristol. There is access for the public.
Yeah, there's a public path that runs through and it's absolutely fabulous during every season and every weather.
An awful lot of energy and money is going into public art, and I would still maintain a lot of people are walking by without even noticing it. Is it really worth doing it all?
For a lot of our works that aren't permanent, the argument is just that. How do those make the impact? And what do people take away? But we're finding that the imaginative legacy, the impact on people's imagination, that is the most important thing.
Now, this is grand three-dimensional art. One has to say that an artist like Banksy did a great deal to make the public aware of their surroundings. What do you think of him?
Banksy has been very important for the city and Bristol and its public art legacy. One brilliant thing that it's doing is making people look up. You know, it's making people look in that street corner, look up at buildings, seek the unexpected.
Whether it's guerrilla graffiti or traditional sculpture, public art makes us look again at where we live.
It's not all in the city centre either. Out here at Avonmouth is this installation by artist Patrick Dorr. It's called Stronghold. It's a giant metal hammer and a spanner over there installed in the year 2001 to celebrate the work and commemorate the work that 200 engineers had carried out on both strengthening and widening the Avonmouth motorway bridge behind me.
The bridge isn't the only feat of engineering to be built here in Avonmouth. Coming up in part 2, I get to see something truly remarkable being constructed right here in North Bristol. Hidden Bristol, sponsored by First Great Western, building a greater West.